Couple chains father to a tree. 3 days later police discover something horrifying. Outskirts of Portland. In a gloomy kitchen, Mr. Michael sat in silence, staring at his cup of cold tea. The entire house was shrouded in the same somber air that had filled his heart since the day his wife passed away 3 years ago. Claire emerged from the bedroom, her hair a mess, her eyes dull. "Is there any coffee, Dad?" "I left it on the table, sweetheart." Claire poured herself a cup, took a sip, then grimaced. "That cheap stuff again. How many times have I told you?" "I don't have much money left, you know that," Michael replied softly. David let out a scornful laugh. "No money? What about this house? What about your retirement checks every month? We're unemployed, you know that, but you don't think about us. I've raised you both all these years. I never once counted the cost," Michael said, his voice trembling. Claire slammed her cup down on the table and snapped, "So now you want us to go beg on the streets?" "No, that's not it, it's just." David interrupted, "You've been stuck in the past long enough. Mom's been gone for 3 years. You never moved on. You're clinging to this house like she's still here." Michael clenched his hands slightly, eyes brimming with tears. "This is the house your mother loved, the place we once lived happily." Claire laughed bitterly. "Happy? You think poverty, confinement, and debt were happiness? If you had sold the house when Mom was still alive, maybe she wouldn't have died from all that stress." David nodded in agreement. "At the very least, there would have been more money for her treatment. But no, you were stubborn. And now we have to suffer the consequences. I wanted to keep a safe place for the family." "Safe?" David shouted. "This is a damn rat hole." The air tightened like a drawn wire. Michael said nothing more, quietly standing up, about to walk into his room when Claire threw a cold remark. "You think you're the only victim here?" Michael stopped in his tracks. He turned around, trying to stay calm. "I never wanted you two to suffer." David flicked the rim of his cup. "That's enough. We're out looking for jobs, getting rejected, living off an old man, rotting in this dump. And you act like you're the only one hurting. It's insane. Have you two ever been grateful for all the years I worked my hands raw to put you through school?" Michael's voice quivered. "Oh God, here we go again with the 'I sacrificed for you' speech. Enough already. We've heard it our whole lives." Claire sneered. The sudden sound of the doorbell broke the tension. Michael rushed to open it. It was Mr. Jack, the elderly neighbor, holding a bag of oranges. "Hey Michael. Picked some oranges for you." Michael gave a forced smile. "Thanks, Jack. It's been a while since you dropped by. I heard yelling this morning. Is everything all right?" Jack peered inside. Michael quickly shook his head. "It's nothing, just kids, you know." Jack hesitated, then nodded. "If you need anything, you call me." Claire stood behind her father, eyeing Jack with annoyance. When the neighbor disappeared from view, she slammed the door shut. "Nosy old man." David sighed and slumped into a chair. "We can't keep living like this. Do you even know how much the power bill is this month?" "I already paid it," Michael muttered. "With your retirement money? Then what are we supposed to live on?" Claire snapped. Michael looked at his children, heartbroken. He no longer recognized when they had become so bitter, so heartless. Poverty, unemployment, and resentment had eaten away at their compassion. David slammed his hand on the table. "We need a solution. Fast." Claire frowned. "Dad, we're asking straight, are you planning to divide the estate or not?" "Estate? All I have is this house. And I'm not planning on selling it. So you're not thinking about us?" David glared. "I always think about you. Just not in the way you want." Claire let out a cold laugh. So it's all about you. You say you love Mom, love us, but you're just keeping everything for yourself. Michael pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his face. You've both changed so much. And you're too weak and selfish. David said, then stormed into his room and slammed the door shut. The kitchen fell into silence again. Claire stood there, lost in thought. Then, without a word, she turned and left too, leaving Michael standing alone, clutching the bag of oranges, tears falling silently. Darkness settled. But the atmosphere in the house grew colder. In the room, David whispered to Claire. We have to do something. Claire glanced at him. What do you mean? If Dad won't split the assets, then if he's gone. Claire jerked her head up, voice dropping, Are you serious? David nodded, his eyes gleaming coldly. If he disappears, it's all ours. Claire swallowed hard. She said nothing, but her eyes lingered on the flickering light bulb. Her heartbeat echoed wildly in her head. That night, Michael went to bed early. He had no idea that, just beyond the wall, his own children were whispering plans that made the darkness even heavier than ever. Have you thought this through? Claire whispered in the living room as the nightlight in Michael's room just went out. David leaned back on the sofa, hand on his forehead. I have. I can't live one more day mooching off a 65-year-old man stuck in the past, crying every night. But, he's our father, David. Claire glanced toward the hallway. I know. David replied flatly. But he's not the man I used to respect. He clings to this house like it's some kind of treasure. Meanwhile, we're wasting away. Claire was silent for a moment. Then she spoke softly, if he dies, everything will go to you. To us. David corrected, locking eyes with her. And you know the law in America. Children inherit naturally when their parents die. No begging. No waiting. What will we do? Claire's voice trembled. David leaned in closer, his voice low, simple plan. Take him somewhere far. Somewhere no one will find him. And, leave him there. That's it. Claire shuddered. You mean, abandon him? What, you want to kill our father yourself? No. Death will come naturally. No water, no food. No witnesses. No blood. No crime. David smirked. Claire said nothing. The silence stretched until the clock struck 1 a.m. She stood up. When? David answered without hesitation, weekend. Friday night. Cops won't be suspicious if we report him missing on Monday morning. Friday came. The house was filled with an odd atmosphere. Michael sat reading an old book in the living room, unaware of what lay ahead. David walked in, jacket in hand. Dad. This weekend, we want to take you somewhere nice. Get some fresh air. A walk in the woods. Near the Columbia River. Michael looked up, surprised. Really? Ever since your mom passed, no one's ever taken me anywhere. That's why we want to change that. Claire forced a smile, trying to mask the deceit. I'm touched. But it's cold. Will it be okay? You need fresh air, Dad. Staying inside all the time makes you look like a prisoner. David patted his shoulder. Michael smiled. Deep down, he still hoped there was some good left in his children. All right. Let me get ready. 9 p.m. David's car sped out of town, heading toward Everpine Forest. It was pitch black, only the car lights slicing through the thick fog. Michael sat in the back, smiling at the scenery, unaware this was a journey of no return. It's been a while since I breathed air like this. He said. Back when your mom was alive, we used to go camping every fall. Claire stared out the window, saying nothing. David forced a smile. Yeah, I remember. Mom loved picking mushrooms. Michael chuckled. She used to say, if she died, she wanted to be buried in a pine forest. The comment made Claire shiver. David tightened his grip on the steering wheel, eyes fixed ahead. We're here, David said as the car stopped at a narrow dirt road leading into the dense forest. No streetlights. No people. Only darkness and the sound of wind. Michael opened the door. This far out? I thought it was just a walk around the neighborhood. The farther, the better, Dad. The air's cleaner, Claire said, pulling a cloth bag from the trunk. David approached and helped Michael out. This place is great. There's a beautiful old tree. You'll love it. Michael walked slowly, panting. I'm not as strong as I used to be. My left knee still hurts. We know. David stopped, turned to Claire. We're here. A large tree trunk, covered in moss. David set the backpack down. Claire opened the cloth bag. Inside were a long metal chain, a padlock, and a large cloth. Before Michael could react, David grabbed him from behind, pinning him down. What is this? What are you doing? He shouted in panic. Claire rushed over, stuffing the cloth into his mouth. David used all his strength to pull his arms back and lock the chain around the tree, binding him tightly. No. You're crazy. Michael thrashed, eyes wide with terror. Stay here. If you'd signed over the house, we wouldn't be here. David said coldly. Claire avoided her father's eyes, trembling. I didn't want this, but... Shut up. David snapped. There's no turning back. Michael hissed through clenched teeth, his voice breaking, you're killing your father. No, David sneered. Just letting nature take its course. Live or die, it's your choice. Michael cried. Tears rolled down his wrinkled cheeks. Your mother will curse you both. We've been cursed for a long time already. Claire whispered, turning away. David checked the chain again, then nodded. It's tight. Claire placed an empty water bottle beside him. To make it look like he got lost. Michael screamed, trying to call for help, but the sound was swallowed by the dense forest. David brushed the dirt off his hands and grabbed Claire's arm. Let's go. Before leaving, Michael cried out one last time, I'm your father. Don't you have a heart? Claire sobbed. David replied coldly, you had your chance. Now, goodbye. They walked away. Michael's figure slowly vanished into the darkness. On the ride back, Claire sat in silence. David turned on the radio to drown out the heavy quiet. What, are we going to tell the police? Claire asked. Wait 2 days. Monday morning, we say Dad went out for a walk and never came back. The whole town will think the old man got lost in the woods. What about the neighbors? No one really cares. Jack. That old man can't even remember faces. David answered, eyes fixed on the road. Claire leaned her head against the window, mumbling, I don't even know if I'm human anymore. You are. David said. And people have to survive. We're going to survive. The next morning, the house was strangely quiet. David pretended to call around, then suddenly shouted in the yard, where did Dad go? Claire screamed, he didn't come home all night. He might be lost. Neighbors began to gather. Jack appeared, leaning on his cane. Where's Michael? I didn't see him go out last night. He said he was going for a walk. David said, crocodile tears forming. We thought he'd be back, but... Jack frowned. Michael's weak. His leg hurts. Why would he walk alone? Claire jumped in, maybe, he wanted to visit Mom's grave. But maybe he got lost. David turned. I'm going to call the police. Jack stared at them, his eyes sharp as if trying to see through them. But he said nothing. Cold wind whistled through the forest trees. A crescent moon hung faintly in the pitch-black sky. Michael sat beneath the old tree, his back against the freezing trunk, his wrists swollen from the tight chain. His face was pale, hair disheveled, eyes sunken and wet with tears. "Is anyone there? Please help me. Someone." He screamed, his voice hoarse from the cold and fear. But only the sound of crickets, a distant owl, and his own ragged breathing replied. He coughed violently, so hard that blood seeped from the corner of his lips. The night air bit into his skin, making him shiver uncontrollably. "David. Claire, my children, why would you do this to your father?" He whispered, tears falling freely. He looked up at the night sky. "Emily, where are you? Can you see this? Can you hear my cries?" Suddenly, a sound from the darkness, a rustling, like footsteps. He held his breath, eyes wide. "Who's there? Please. I'm trapped. Help me." No answer. Just a squirrel darting through the branches. He gasped. His legs were numb. He tried to yank at his wrists, but the chain was too tight. Blood trickled out, warm against the freezing air. The next morning, faint sunlight filtered through the leaves. Michael was still there, lips cracked and dry, eyes glazed over with hunger and thirst. He hadn't slept all night. Every sound made his heart leap, clinging to a shred of hope, only to be crushed again. "They're not coming back," he murmured. "They really left me here to die." The wind scraped the forest floor. Trees swayed. A leaf fell onto his shoulder. He gave a bitter laugh, dry and hollow. "I fed you kids spoon by spoon, pill by pill. And this is how it ends. Dying alone, in silence." Back in town, David and Claire continued their act. Early Monday morning, they arrived at the police station. "We haven't seen our father since Friday night," David said. "He went out for a walk like usual, but never came back." "Usual?" Officer Ethan frowned. "I thought Mr. Michael had knee problems." "Yes," Claire jumped in, eyes red. "But he often visited our mother's grave. Maybe he went farther this time." Ethan took notes. "Did anyone in the neighborhood see him leave?" "We don't think so." David answered quickly. "We'll file a missing person report." Ethan said. "But we need more details about his clothes, places he usually went." David feigned concern, "We're also handing out flyers. I just hope he hasn't gone too far." That afternoon, Jack dropped by the house. "Any news yet?" he asked, his gaze suspicious. Claire choked up, "Not yet. We're going crazy with worry." Jack stared at them. "It's strange. Michael wasn't the type to wander off. And he always had his cane. I didn't see it anywhere." David blinked. "Maybe he forgot. We're all so rattled, Mr. Jack. Did you two check the northern woods? Michael once said he liked it there." Claire forced a smile. "We'll go there soon. Thank you." As Jack walked away, David whispered, "That old man is too nosy." Claire murmured anxiously, "He won't let this go easily." David shrugged, "As long as no one has proof, no one can touch us." In the forest, Michael began hearing voices. Emily's voice, soft and faint, "Michael, don't sleep, hang on. Emily, you're back." He whispered, staring into the void. "I'm so tired. I can't hold on." A ground bee landed on his shoulder. He didn't bother to brush it off. Mosquito bites covered his arms. His body started to smell foul. "Death might be easier," he mumbled. Another day passed. Tuesday night. David and Claire sat watching the news in the living room. "No one's found the body yet." David said, munching on chips. Don't say that. Claire snapped. What if he survived? No water, no food in the forest. What do you think? David laughed. Luckily, he didn't call anyone. I already removed the battery from Dad's phone. Claire buried her head into a pillow. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see him. David clicked his tongue. We have to be strong. For the future. For the money, right? Claire hissed. David didn't respond. At the police station, Ethan was reviewing the file when another officer walked in. Someone from town reported hearing screams in the northern woods. Maybe we should check it out. Mark the location. We'll send someone in the morning. In the woods, Michael gasped for air. He hadn't eaten or drunk in nearly 4 days. His throat was a desert. Night temperatures dropped below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. His hands were numb. The wounds on his wrists had turned a deep purple. His vision blurred. Yet he still whispered. Emily, forgive me. I couldn't protect our children. A strange sound echoed, like footsteps. Help, me, he murmured, barely conscious. Then his head dropped. Everything faded to black. Wednesday morning. Anthony, an old hunter and friend of Jack, went hunting early in the woods. Damn, it's cold. He muttered. Doubt I'll catch anything today. Walking along a small stream, he suddenly stopped. A faint groan came from somewhere nearby. Anthony tilted his head. Someone there? No answer. Just another faint moan. He followed the sound, pushing through tall grass. As he neared the old tree, he shouted. What the hell? In front of him was an old man chained to the tree, face swollen, body skeletal, eyes closed. Sir! Hey, sir! Anthony rushed over, shaking him. Can you hear me? Michael stirred slightly, whispered, help. Anthony's hands trembled as he opened his backpack and pulled out a knife. I'm cutting you loose. Don't sleep. You hear me? Michael whimpered. My son. Anthony turned pale. David? David did this? Michael nodded weakly, then passed out. Anthony lifted him up and carried him out of the woods. The musty smell of the deep forest clung to the car as Anthony sped toward town. On the back seat, Michael lay barely breathing, wrapped in a thick hunting jacket. His eyes fluttered open, lips trembling with incoherent words. Hang on, Mr. Michael. Hang on. Anthony kept repeating, gripping the wheel tight, face tense. In his mind, the horrific image of a human treated like an animal played over and over. A retired man, who had lived peacefully, left to rot in the forest like garbage. Michael's memories began flashing back. Friday night. The first time he awoke in the woods was near midnight. Cold wind sliced through the leaves. His body ached horribly. His back, pressed against the tree trunk, felt paralyzed. Ants crawled over his legs, biting into his thin skin. "AAA," he cried, shaking his legs to stop the pain. But the chain held him back, a cruel reminder. He was a prisoner, abandoned in the wild, unheard, unseen. My child. David. You can't. You wouldn't do this to me, he muttered over and over like a desperate chant. Saturday morning, light rain fell. The drizzle stung like 1,000 needles. Michael shivered violently, lips purple. His clothes were soaked, his legs caked in mud. Nameless insects crawled across his shirt. There was nothing left to fear. His cries echoed, but the forest returned only cruel silence. The leaves rustled in the wind. No one answered. Only that eerie, cold quiet remained. Saturday afternoon. Hunger. Thirst. Pain. Those three things gnawed at him, minute by minute. When a squirrel ran by, he instinctively tried to lunge but the chain held him back. The pain from his wrists made him cry. "Oh Lord! I was wrong. But please save me. At the very least, let me see the eyes of another human being, before I die." Night fell. Michael developed a fever. He muttered constantly. "Emily, where are you? Why haven't you come for me? You promised you'd wait for me." The wind howled. Leaves dropped onto his face. Each strong gust felt like it was ripping his soul from his body. Sunday morning. The sun rose slowly, almost mockingly. He could no longer feel the warmth of its rays. His hands were blistered, dried blood crusted over his swollen wrists. He tried to sit upright, but the pain was unbearable. Even the slightest movement made it feel like his body was splitting in two. But worse than all of that, he had begun to think about death. "Maybe dying wouldn't be so bad," he whispered. "Maybe Emily is waiting for me." A crow landed nearby. It tilted its head, staring at him. He stared back. "You're waiting for me to die too, aren't you?" he said, eyes bloodshot. The crow didn't answer. It simply let out a single caw and flew away, leaving him alone in the most crushing solitude of his life. Sunday afternoon. A sudden downpour. The sky darkened. Michael had been lying motionless for nearly an hour. His hand hung limp, his eyes wide open. But in his heart, there was still a fragile sliver of hope. "I won't die, not like this," he forced a whisper. "I have to live, to tell everyone." The wind howled again. He looked up at the sky. "Emily, you used to say I was the strongest man you knew. Give me a little more strength now." Sunday night. The rain had stopped. The moon peeked out again. He no longer had the strength to scream. Every moan that escaped his lips was dry, broken. When he heard the faint barking of dogs in the distance, his heart nearly stopped with hope. "Help, help me," he moaned. The barking stopped. "Please," he cried. "Someone, is anyone out there?" No one heard. Monday morning. He awoke from the pain. This time, it was from the infected ant bites, now beginning to fester. The smell of blood, of slow bodily decay, began to rise faintly. He panicked when he realized, his body was beginning to rot. "No, no. I don't want to die yet," he screamed. For the first time in years, he wanted to live with all his might. To see Emily again. To scream in David's face. To shout in Claire's. To tell the truth. To yell to the world, "I didn't deserve this." Monday night. The rain whispered steadily. For the first time, he clearly heard a person crying, but it was a cry from within his own soul. "When I was strong, I raised them. I never let them go hungry, never laid a hand on them. And now, they throw me away like garbage." He sobbed. His tears mixed with the rain. "My love, do you see this? Our children." Tuesday morning. Michael lay still. His eyes half closed. His heart still beat, but very faintly. Every breath was agony. He didn't know how much longer he would survive. But the strange thing was, he still wasn't dead. Perhaps it was hatred, or the burning desire to speak the truth, that kept him going. "As long as I have one breath left, I must live," he whispered. That afternoon, in the forest, a deer walked past. It paused in front of Michael, sniffed for a moment, then walked away. And Michael opened his eyes again. "My love, do you see? I'm not dead yet." Back to the present. Anthony drove straight to the town's medical center. "There's a man dying in my car. Hurry." 3 nurses rushed out. One shouted, "He's in hypovolemic shock. Broken bones. Signs of sepsis." Anthony stepped back, heart pounding. He said his name was Michael. Left to die in the forest, by his own son. The nurses pushed the stretcher into the ER. A doctor turned to Anthony. Where did you find him? North Woods, by a big tree near the stream. He was chained. Chained? The doctor exclaimed. Like an animal? Anthony nodded, eyes misting. I saw it myself. He said, David, my son, left me there. The entire ER fell silent. Anthony clenched his fists. I'm not letting this go. You need to stay calm. Claire said, her hand on David's shoulder as they sat in the living room, steam still rising from their cups of tea. David took a deep breath, staring at a photo of young Michael on the wall. He's dead, right? I don't know. You don't know. But if he's alive, why hasn't anyone said anything? Claire replied, her voice shaky. Yeah, it's been 4 days now. David nodded, his eyes darting nervously. No buzz around town either. Maybe no one found him. We still have to keep playing our roles. Claire said softly. The police could show up at any moment. The doorbell rang suddenly, making them both jump. David glanced at Claire and walked over to open it. Jack stood on the porch, frowning, eyes narrowed suspiciously. Hello, Mr. Jack. David feigned a cheerful tone. Any news? The old man asked, leaning on his cane. Claire rushed out from the kitchen. No, nothing yet. The police haven't contacted us. We're really, really worried. Jack looked them both up and down. Funny. Someone told me they heard Michael calling out from the forest. Up north. David feigned surprise. Who said that? Anthony. Jack replied, not taking his eyes off them. He said he heard moaning. Went into the woods this morning. Claire swallowed hard. Really? Why didn't you go with him? I've got a bad leg. Jack said, then turned. Just remember, if there's something you're hiding, it always comes out eventually. David slammed the door shut, hitting the frame with both hands. Anthony. Damn it. He growled. If you really found the old man. No one's going to believe a crazy old hunter. Claire said, but her eyes were filled with fear. At the police station, Anthony burst in, his face tight with fury. In his hands was a paper bag full of blood and mud-stained clothes. Officer Ethan stood up from his desk. What's going on? I just pulled Michael out of the woods, nearly starved to death. Anthony slammed the bag onto the desk. Ethan's eyes widened. What did you say? 3 hours ago. North Woods. Big tree. Chained up. Nearly dead. Anthony said, voice sharp. He was awake for a few seconds. Said the name David. Said his own son left him to die. Ethan froze. Dear God. I took him to the hospital. The nurses can confirm it. Anthony said quickly. Please. You have to arrest them now. If you don't. Ethan raised a hand. Calm down. We'll open an investigation immediately. That afternoon, David and Claire continued their charade. They printed missing posters, walked around town, pasting them to walls and utility poles. Beloved father, Michael Foster missing since the 13th. If anyone has information, please contact. They went to the grocery store, the church, the bakery. Do you think anyone's suspicious? Claire asked. No, David shook his head slightly. The more worried we act, the less they'll suspect. At the bakery, the owner, Margaret, a sharp-eyed American woman in her 50s, stared at them. You kids still haven't found anything? Claire nodded. No, Ms. Margaret. We're so worried. Margaret took a sip of coffee, then said slowly, Michael was a good man. I remember when I was little, he used to buy bread for poor kids. Claire forced a smile. Our father was always kind. And that's why, Margaret looked David straight in the eyes, if someone hurt him, this town won't forgive it. David froze. Ma'am, what do you mean? Margaret set down her cup. Nothing. Just a warning. That evening, a police car pulled up in front of David's house. There was a loud knock at the door. David opened it, then instinctively stepped back when he saw two officers, and Anthony standing behind them. We have a search warrant, Ethan said, holding up the papers. Mr. Michael Foster was found this morning. In critical condition. Claire staggered, nearly collapsing. No, that's not possible. He's alive. David asked, his voice stiff and hollow. Anthony stepped forward and pointed directly at him, and he said it was you two who left him in the woods. I'm the one who saved him. I heard it with my own ears. David looked around, then blurted out something foolish, he's old, maybe he's just confused. Ethan replied coldly, he was very clear, forced into the woods, chained, starved. The marks from the chains are still visible on his wrists. He's not confused. Claire burst into tears. No. I just followed David. I didn't want to do it. David spun around and glared at her, shut up. We're placing you both under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and abandonment of a vulnerable person, Ethan said firmly. You have the right to remain silent. I'll talk. I'll tell everything. Claire cried out. You're betraying me. David shouted. Anthony couldn't hold back any longer and yelled, he doesn't even deserve to be called human. Claire was handcuffed, still sobbing. I'm sorry. I was wrong. David struggled but was quickly restrained. You have no proof. It's all just words. My father's hated me for years. And now he's alive to say it clearly in court, Ethan responded sharply. The two were taken away under the furious stares of neighbors who had filled the small street. Jack appeared from a distance, saying slowly, I knew it. Something wasn't right. Margaret shook her head. A father like Mr. Michael, treated that way. Anthony whispered, eyes still fixed on the departing police car, please, let him survive. At the hospital, Mr. Michael lay in bed, his body wrapped in bandages, 4 lines in both arms. The doctor said he had a severe infection, was dangerously dehydrated, and could suffer mild nerve damage. But when he heard that David and Claire had been arrested, he only closed his eyes and softly said, I don't understand how my children became like this. Anthony sat beside him, holding his hand, you're not alone. The whole town is standing with you. Michael opened his eyes, lips trembling. Thank you. Anthony. That morning, the town was wrapped in a thick blanket of mist. Anthony stood outside the hospital, eyes on the dew collecting on the treetops. After a sleepless night, he waited anxiously for sunrise to check on Michael's condition. A young nurse ran out of the emergency room, waving. Anthony. He's awake. Anthony rushed inside, face tense. In the room, Michael was lying in bed, eyes half open, for still in his arm, lips cracked and dry. But when he saw Anthony, a faint light returned to his gaze. You were the one who saved me. Michael's voice was hoarse. Anthony sat beside the bed and took his hand. It was me. Anthony. We used to fish together at the little lake near the church. Michael exhaled a weak breath, eyes welling up. I thought I would die out there. Don't say that. You're stronger than all of us. For days in the forest, surviving is nothing short of a miracle. Michael closed his eyes. It wasn't a miracle. It's because I still had something left to say. Anthony squeezed his hand. Then say it now. Tell it all. Let justice see their true faces. Michael opened his eyes and looked directly at Anthony. David. Claire, they were the ones who took me out there, chained me, and left me. Anthony nodded, eyes brimming with tears. I believe you. I already told the police. You're not alone anymore. Michael was silent for a moment, then whispered, I don't want to die, until I see them bow their heads and confess. Anthony looked at him and said firmly, you will see it. I promise. Meanwhile, at the police station, Ethan and a young investigator named Laura were reviewing surveillance footage near Michael's home. Friday night, around 9 p.m., here, Laura pointed at the screen. David's car leaving the neighborhood. Plate matches, Ethan nodded. Laura fast-forwarded to when they returned. Close to midnight, they come back. But no sign of Mr. Michael. Ethan stacked the documents. It's clear. They took him out and never brought him back. Do we have enough to charge them? Laura asked. Ethan paused. With Michael's statement, the injuries from the chains, and Anthony's testimony, I'd say yes. Laura nodded. I'll request a more thorough search of David's home. Ethan agreed, good. I want everything airtight. That afternoon, the investigative team entered the small house where David and Claire had lived, checking every corner. Officer Abigail opened the bedroom closet. A burlap bag. Inside, a length of chain and a lock. Ethan stepped over, examining it closely. Dried blood, likely Michael's. We'll run tests, Abigail said. In David's desk drawer, Laura found a stack of disorganized papers. One of them was a bank statement. Last month, they withdrew all of Mr. Michael's retirement money. It's unclear if he knew. Laura reported. Ethan frowned. Premeditated. Not a heat-of-the-moment crime. At the hospital, Michael struggled to sit up with the help of a nurse. Anthony was always by his side, holding his hand. I feel tired, but lighter inside, Michael said. Anthony smiled. You're doing the right thing. You didn't survive by chance. God gave you a second chance to seek justice. Michael gave a faint smile. But justice can't give me back my memories, or the love I lost. Anthony squeezed his hand. But it'll make those ungrateful bastards pay. A nurse entered and smiled gently. We have good news. You're recovering well. In a few days, we can remove the 4. Michael nodded, eyes drifting to the window. I just want to get out of here, go back to my porch. Drink my morning tea like I used to. Anthony chuckled, you'll be back there soon. In the holding cell, Claire sat curled up, eyes swollen, arms wrapped around her head. David stood against the wall, expression cold and blank. They'll charge me. But I won't confess, David said like a command. Claire looked up, her voice weak, I can't take it anymore, David. I want to tell everything. I don't want to live in this nightmare. If you open your mouth, you'll die in prison, David growled. Claire stood up and stepped toward the bars, shouting, I want to see a lawyer. I want to confess. David slammed his fist into the wall. You really betrayed me. Claire turned back, tears streaming. I stopped being human the moment we left him under that tree. That night, Margaret sat in her bakery, holding a small radio. A news broadcast from Portland played. Michael Foster, the man abandoned in the forest by his son and daughter-in-law, is now recovering at the town hospital. The case has sparked public outrage. Margaret shook her head and placed her hand over her chest. Poor man. Jack entered the shop, placing his hat on the table. I knew it from the start. David was never a good kid. He's cold-blooded. Mr. Anthony is truly brave, Margaret said. Not just brave, Jack replied quietly. He's a symbol of conscience. In a world growing colder. Margaret nodded. I think, after this, our town will never be the same. The next morning, police held a press conference in front of the station. Ethan stood before the cameras. We confirmed that Mr. Michael Foster was lured into the forest by his son and daughter-in-law, chained, and abandoned. He was found in critical condition but is now stable. A reporter asked, "What was the motive, sir?" "Greed. Access to retirement funds. Personal resentment," Ethan stated clearly. "We will bring this case to court as soon as possible." Anthony stood behind them, quietly watching, his eyes red. At the hospital, Michael watched the TV. When his name was mentioned in the report, he paused. "Do you want me to turn it off?" the nurse asked gently. Michael shook his head. "No. I need to hear it." The broadcast ended with the anchor's words, "A case that shocked the entire United States. But it also reminds us, compassion never disappears, as long as we don't close our eyes to the pain of others." Michael closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Anthony entered, holding a bouquet. "A gift from Margaret. She asked me to tell you, we're always with you." Michael smiled softly. "First time in days. I feel warm." The wail of police sirens echoed down the narrow street as the convoy transferred David and Claire to the Central Detention Center in Portland. Outside, dozens of townspeople had gathered since early morning, faces burning with anger, eyes blazing. No one hid their emotions. Demons in the guise of children. A middle-aged man shouted. "You don't deserve to be called human." Margaret yelled, clutching the morning paper showing a photo of Michael lying beneath the tree. David sat in the back seat, hands cuffed, face grim. Claire slumped over, face buried in her palms, sobbing. "Look, Claire." David growled. "You started this show. You opened your mouth, and now the whole town spits on me." "Shut up." Claire choked. "I opened my mouth, because I still had a shred of humanity left. I couldn't live with the guilt." David sneered at her. "Weak little woman." The officer in the front seat turned around, "Both of you, shut up. Stay silent unless you want your mouths gagged." Claire took a deep breath and looked out the window. The townspeople were throwing scraps of paper, bottle caps, and trash at the vehicle. Among them was Jack, his eyes red, his lips trembling, unable to speak. Anthony stood silently at the back, fists clenched. As the vehicle disappeared down the road, he turned to Jack, "I've never seen this town this angry before." Jack replied softly, "Well, Michael was the last decent man of our generation." At the hospital, Mr. Michael was being moved to a special recovery room. His condition had stabilized. Though he wasn't ready for discharge yet, the atmosphere around him had changed. "You're known across the country now," Anthony said with a light chuckle, placing the newspaper down. Michael flipped to the front page, "A nation's outrage, father left to die in forest by his own children." He sighed and closed his eyes. "I never wanted to be famous like this." Anthony nodded. "But you needed justice. And now, the whole country stands with you." A while later, the doctor entered, holding test results. "The good news is your life is no longer in danger. But there's something you should know." Michael opened his eyes. "You've suffered nerve damage in your left arm. Movement will be permanently limited. You might not be able to lift heavy objects again." Michael nodded, unsurprised. Being alive is more than enough. That afternoon, in the interrogation room, Claire sat alone with her appointed lawyer. "I want to confess everything," she said, her voice faint. "I don't want to hide anything anymore." The lawyer sighed. "You know this testimony could mean several years in prison, right?" "I do," Claire replied immediately. "But I also know if I don't confess, I'll die every day from guilt." She began recounting everything. "It was David's idea. He said we had to do something since his father refused to split the inheritance. He planned it all. From removing Mr. Michael's phone SIM card, to preparing the chains, gloves, gag cloth. Her voice broke. When he chained Mr. Michael to that tree, I just stood there. I didn't stop him. I deserved to be punished. In the next room, David still wore a calm facade. His lawyer tried to stop him from saying anything, but David was too exhausted to listen. She betrayed me, didn't she? He said with a dry laugh. I knew it. You should remain silent, the lawyer urged. David shook his head. No. I want to talk. I want the whole damn town to know my father wasn't the saint they think he was. Investigator Ethan sat upright. What are you trying to say? David spoke slowly, each word bitter. He never saw me as his real son. I was just a shadow of my older brother, the one who died in an accident. All my childhood, I lived under the name, he'll never be like his brother. Did he love me? No. He just pretended. He lived for the picture-perfect image he built in his head. And that's why you decided to leave him to die? Ethan asked. David paused for a second, then replied, that's why I don't feel guilty. That same afternoon, in the town's small hall, a public meeting was held to discuss raising funds to support Mr. Michael. I think, we should fix his old roof. Redo the yard. Add some support features for the elderly, Margaret suggested. Anthony stood up, I'll take care of the construction. He needs a safe place to live when he's discharged. We can donate food and basic supplies, a young woman said. No one objected. In fact, several people began to wipe away tears. Not just because he's a victim, Jack said. But because he's who we all once admired, kind, quiet, selfless, never complaining. The whole hall erupted in applause. That evening, in the hospital room, Michael received official news. David and Claire had been formally charged with overwhelming evidence. They'll be going to trial soon. Based on current statements, Claire is cooperating with the investigation and may receive a reduced sentence. But David, Ethan shook his head. Michael looked out the window. After a long pause, he asked. Do you believe? I once loved them like my own flesh and blood. Ethan gave a small nod. I believe it. But sadly, not everyone knows how to protect that kind of love. Anthony stood beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You still have us. The whole town is waiting for you to come home. Michael didn't speak. He just nodded, eyes misty. The next morning, doctors announced that he could be discharged in 2 days. At the same time, a group of workers began renovating the small house on the outskirts. Anthony led the crew, while Jack and some neighbors mixed cement and carried bricks. We'll finish before he gets back, Anthony promised. A little girl ran up and handed him a drawing she made, a picture of Mr. Michael sitting on a bench beside another old man. Anthony looked at the picture, his heart tightening. In the holding cell, David sat in silence, not saying a word. His eyes were hollow, lips pressed tightly together. Claire sat in another corner, hands still slightly trembling. Claire's lawyer arrived. The court might consider leniency if you continue to cooperate. She nodded, eyes red. I don't want to run anymore. If I could go back. I'd never have gotten in that car that night. At the hospital, Michael looked at a card from an anonymous sender. Inside, it read. You are not alone. The whole town loves you. Please keep living stronger than ever. He placed it on the table and wiped away his tears with a handkerchief. Then he turned to Anthony, sitting beside him. Mr. Anthony. I owe you my life. Anthony smiled. No. You survived, because you never gave up. For days after their arrest, David and Claire were brought back to town to prepare for the preliminary hearing. News of Michael's survival had spread far and wide, making the case one of the most talked about of the year. While the media focused on the cruelty of the crime, in the quiet hospital room, Mr. Michael was slowly coming back to life thanks to the kindness of strangers. That morning, Anthony arrived with a bag full of fruit and a cup of hot coffee. "Your morning coffee, just the way you like it," he said, placing the cup beside the bed. Michael gave a faint smile. "I never thought I'd drink coffee again." Anthony sat beside the bed. "And from now on, you'll have it every morning, just one cup, doctor's orders." Michael nodded gently. Then he looked out the window. "Today's so beautiful. I haven't seen sunlight like this in ages." Anthony smiled. "The townsfolk are fixing up your house. Jack's supervising, Margaret's cooking lunch for the workers. Everyone wants to help." Michael looked at him, eyes brimming with tears. "I survived, because of you. And now, the whole town is lifting me up." "You lived because you never gave up," Anthony replied. "You're not alone, Michael. You're part of us." That afternoon, Margaret walked into the hospital, carrying a basket of food. "Beef and tomato sauce with rice," she said, beaming. "And this is chestnut bread, your favorite." Michael looked at her, overwhelmed. "Miss Margaret, thank you. I've never been cared for like this before." Margaret gave a gentle smile. "You used to care for the whole town without asking for anything. Now it's our turn." Michael bowed his head, hands trembling as he grasped hers. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just finish your food," she joked. Anthony chimed in from behind, "I told you. You've got to eat more to get your strength back." Michael looked at them, and for the first time, a strange light sparkled in his eyes. Hope. The next morning, Jack came to the hospital with a hand-drawn plan. "We're redoing the kitchen, laying new tiles, adding a covered patio. Here, take a look." Michael held the drawing, deeply moved. "You drew this?" "Yeah. I'm not great, but Anthony gets it. And that old patio you loved, we're putting your bench right back where it was." Michael chuckled softly. "I missed that bench. And I missed walking past your place and smelling fresh coffee. I'm bringing that memory back," Jack grinned. Michael laughed for the first time since he had woken up. That afternoon, the doctor announced, "If there are no complications, you can be discharged by the end of the week." Anthony cheered, "Perfect timing." Michael asked curiously, "Timing for what?" Margaret stepped in, holding a new wool sweater. "We're throwing a little welcome home party. Just a small celebration for your return." Michael blinked. "I don't know if I deserve that." "You deserve it more than anyone," Anthony replied firmly. That night, in the detention center, Claire lay still in her cell. A female officer entered and handed her an envelope. "What's this?" Claire asked. "From Mr. Michael," the officer replied before walking out. Claire opened the letter, reading each neatly written line. "Claire, I don't know what led you to go along with David. But I believe deep down, there's still some humanity in you. I'm not ready to forgive, but I want you to live with the truth and from it, find repentance. I don't hate you. I'm just sad." "Michael," Claire read it over and over, then covered her face and wept. Saturday morning. The hospital van stopped in front of the small house on the outskirts. From a distance, dozens of townspeople stood waiting. A banner fluttered above. "Welcome home, Mr. Michael." Michael stepped slowly out of the van, supported by Anthony. His eyes welled with tears as he took in the sight: a brand new roof, freshly painted fence, swept yard, and tiny flowers planted along the walkway. Margaret ran up and wrapped her arms around him. "Welcome home." Jack held his other arm, laughing. "This yard's been waiting for your morning coffee." The whole crowd applauded warmly. Michael choked up, "I don't know what to say." Anthony said softly, "All you have to do is live happily." All morning, neighbors came in and out to visit. Michael sat on his familiar wooden bench, a wool blanket over his legs, a cup of hot coffee in hand. No one mentioned David. No one asked about the trial. Only smiles, warm wishes, and peace. By noon, a small celebration began. There was light wine, bread, and even a child playing guitar and singing, "Thanks to Life." Michael sat among the crowd, his eyes reflecting a light he thought he had lost forever. In the late afternoon, as people left, Michael sat with Anthony and Jack. "This is my new family," he said slowly. Anthony nodded. "We don't choose where we're born, but we can choose who we call family." Jack raised his coffee cup. "From now on, you boil the water, I'll bring the bread, and Anthony makes the coffee. Deal?" Michael smiled. "Deal." That night, he sat alone in the yard. Moonlight filtered through the trees. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Emily, do you see? I'm home." Monday morning. The town's courthouse officially opened the preliminary hearing for the case, intentional abandonment of an elderly person. The courtyard was filled with townspeople. Reporters and local news crews had set up early. The atmosphere was solemn, tense as a drawn string. Michael had been cleared by doctors to attend with special assistance. He arrived in a wheelchair, pushed in by Anthony through the back entrance. The entire courtroom rose when he entered, not out of protocol, but respect. "Are you sure you want to be here in person?" Anthony whispered as they moved through the hallway. Michael nodded. "I need to hear them. Not to blame but to understand why." The trial began. David and Claire were escorted in. David walked slowly, his face emotionless, eyes scanning the crowd without interest. Claire looked noticeably thinner, one hand over her stomach, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The judge, a woman named Grace Carter, read the opening statement and invited the prosecutor to present the charges. The defendants David Foster and Claire Bennett are charged with conspiracy to commit murder, abuse of a family member, and intentional abandonment of an elderly person leading to life-threatening conditions. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. David's lawyer stood up and declared confidently, "My client denies all charges. He claims he only intended to teach his father a lesson. There was no intention to kill." The prosecutor glanced at the files. "We have evidence that the defendant prepared a metal chain, a lock, and a gag. Records from the hardware store confirm David was the purchaser. And we have the testimony of Claire Bennett." Claire kept her head down, tears streaming. "Your Honor," Claire stood up, her voice trembling. "I was wrong. Deeply wrong. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to speak the truth." Judge Carter nodded. "Go ahead." Claire swallowed hard, her eyes drifting toward Michael. "When David told me his plan, I was scared. But I didn't stop him. I always thought Mr. Michael was just a burden. But when I heard him pleading, I realized we were committing the most monstrous act of our lives." In the gallery, Margaret squeezed Jack's hand, eyes welling. "He didn't fight back. He just asked, why? And I couldn't answer because there was no reason good enough." Claire sobbed. The judge asked softly, "Do you feel remorse?" Claire nodded, tears falling uncontrollably. "I hope to be forgiven. Not to escape punishment but to sleep peacefully the rest of my life." David stood, his face like stone. "I'm not sorry. I won't pretend. I did it because he was selfish. My whole life, I was the shadow of my dead brother. He only ever loved him." The room fell silent. Anthony looked at Michael and asked quietly, "Are you okay?" Michael nodded. But his eyes were heavy with sorrow. He raised his hand, requesting to speak. Judge Carter looked at him. "Mr. Michael, you wish to say something?" Michael was wheeled to the center of the courtroom. He lifted his head and looked David straight in the eyes. "You're right about one thing. I wasn't fair. I kept holding on to the memory of your brother, because the loss was too great. But I never hated you." David said nothing. Michael continued, "When your mother died, I thought I'd lost everything. But I still hoped you'd bring love back into this house. Instead, you chained me like an animal." Gasps echoed through the room. Michael's voice cracked. "There were moments I wanted to die. But God kept me here, so I could witness this day." David still wouldn't look at him. "But I don't hate you," Michael said firmly. "I choose to forgive. Not to forget but to find peace for myself." Judge Carter bowed her head. Many in the room wiped away tears. After a recess, Judge Carter gave her ruling. David Foster, 18 years in prison. No parole for the first 10 years. Claire Bennett, 8 years in prison, with potential for reduced sentence upon continued cooperation and good behavior. David showed no emotion. Claire collapsed onto the table, weeping. Michael closed his eyes and let out a long breath. Anthony placed a hand on his shoulder. "Justice did its part. Now it's time you live yours." 3 months later. Portland skies were clear and blue. Michael sat on his familiar yard bench. On the table beside him, a steaming cup of coffee and an open newspaper. Anthony arrived, holding a basket of bread. "Here's the latest. Claire wrote a letter from prison. Says she's learning to bake." Michael smiled gently. "Maybe, she'll find her way back to herself." "And David?" Jack asked, bringing out a jug of lemonade. "Silent," Anthony replied. "No one's heard a word." Michael let out a long breath. "That's fine. Everyone has to live with what they've done." Margaret came out from the kitchen. "And you? Any plans for next month?" Michael took a sip of coffee, his gaze softening. "I'm thinking of replanting my old vegetable garden. And, writing a few words about all this. Not to complain but to remind someone, that forgiveness can save a life." That afternoon, Michael walked around the yard. Neighborhood kids came running. A little girl handed him a bouquet of wildflowers. "My mom says you're a good man," she said shyly. Michael crouched down and took the flowers. "You're the better one because you give flowers to old people." The child giggled and ran off. Michael looked at the bouquet, his heart full of emotion. That evening, he wrote in an old notebook. "I survived not just by instinct but because someone reached out and pulled me back. When I thought I was the loneliest person in the world, it was human kindness that touched me. And then I knew life is meant to pass that on to someone else." That weekend, Michael invited Anthony, Jack, and Margaret over for dinner. "Traditional stew, apple pie, and black coffee," he announced. Jack laughed, "Feels like Christmas dinner." Margaret raised her glass, "I want to toast Mr. Michael not only for surviving, but for keeping his heart whole." Anthony added, "And to this town for lifting up the man they refused to let fall." They clinked glasses. Laughed. Ate. Talked about the old days, about books, about the songs Michael once sang with his wife. When night came, Michael stayed outside alone. The moon glowed overhead. A gentle breeze rustled the trees. He closed his eyes and whispered. "Emily, do you see? I forgave. And at last, I'm at peace." This story is a profound reminder about greed, ingratitude, and how easily one can lose their humanity in pursuit of material things. Through Mr. Michael's tragedy, we learn that love must be returned with respect, not betrayal. But it is also through his forgiveness that we see, forgiveness is not only about saving others, it is also about freeing ourselves. Compassion, community, and humanity will always shine through the darkness. To live kindly, with gratitude, and with integrity, this is life's greatest treasure.